to this meeting. On the Ghana SOCO project, this webinar series. And this first webinar, which we're holding today, is on the question, how can we promote a coordinated development approach in Northern Ghana? I think essentially, as we all know, this program is a program being carried out, supported by the World Bank, and will be implemented in collaboration with the Ministry of Local Government, Decentralization and Rural Development, and of course with other institutions, including ourselves, the Northern Development Authority, whose board I chair. We have a number of questions that we will be going through, and the idea is to pose some questions, and there are a number of panelists. We have 4 or 5 people, I think 5 people on the panel they will introduce themselves shortly. They will address one of the questions each, and we will ask those who are participating in the webinar to ask follow-on questions if there are any, and we will hope that those questions will be brought to the attention of the group as a whole, so that those can also be addressed as we go along. So let me begin by asking the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. Samuel Sefpesa of the local government.
So Dr. Abdullahi will first start with, I will request Acting Country Director from the World Bank to provide the opening remarks, and also after that, Nicola Parani has joined to make some opening remarks, and after that, we'll start the panel discussion today. So
I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking at the agenda. I'm so sorry. Yes, sorry. Our internet has been a bit messy. Yes. So please, can we to welcome is it Dr. Sahel, the Acting Country Director of the World Bank, to make some opening remarks.
Thank you very much. So yeah, to introduce myself, I'm Dhruv Sahai. I'm the program leader for Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. I'm acting for Country Director Pierre Laporte, who's currently on leave. Let me start by making a few opening remarks. I'd like to start by congratulating the entire team at the Ministry of Local Government, Decentralisation and Rural Development for the successful launch of the Ghana SOCO project last month. I believe it was launched on the 25th of November. It was an important milestone, which would not have been possible without the support and input of various key stakeholders, both within and outside the government. I also want to congratulate the National Development Planning Commission, the Northern Development Authority, and our own Social Sustainability and Inclusion Global Practice, along with the World Bank's Community and Local Development Global Solutions Group, for organizing this webinar series focused on Northern Ghana. I do want to mention a few points about the Ghana SOCO project and today's webinar. Firstly, the needs are surging across the Gulf of Guinea sub-region, where multiple crises have emerged. External pressures of conflict, climate change, and COVID-19 have been compounded by long-standing challenges of poverty, exclusion, and weak governance. And all of these have or may contribute to marginalization and inequality. Also, the lack of opportunities for youth, intercommunity tensions, and structural fragilities pose an increasing security challenge in the northern region of the Gulf of Guinea countries that face serious threats of southward transmission of the rapidly escalating Sahel conflict. So it is important for us to respond to such borderless threats and calls for thinking regionally and acting locally in terms of finding regionally coordinated solutions that effectively respond to local needs. And thus, we need to work closely together with our neighbors in Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Benin under this project to explore joint solutions and cross-border interventions to address these threats in a coordinated manner under this project. We also need to find local solutions to challenges, exchange learning with one another, and apply these lessons in a regional context. In addition, the northern regions of Ghana have also faced, they lag the rest of the country on all development indicators. So poverty rates were continuously above 50%. In the north, northern rural areas lack access to critical infrastructure. The northern borders are seeing an upsurge in the flow of persons and weapons from neighboring countries. Tribal ties between bordering communities, porous border controls, weak regional organizations, efforts, lack of citizen understanding of the risk, and particularly the possibility of a spillover of fragility, conflict, and violence from the Sahel sub-region have all raised concerns regarding insecurity and political instability for not just the the northern region, but also for the government. So this project, which was launched last month, is a specific example of targeting vulnerable communities in the north to proactively prevent the spread of conflict from Sahel and reduce the vulnerability to climate change and strengthen local institutions. There is an allocation of 150 million of financing for Ghana out of a total of 450 million, which is being funded by the bank's International Development Association, or IDA, for 4 countries. And the project also recognizes the need for a multifaceted approach of investing in community-level infrastructure that effectively responds to local needs and improves local economic opportunities, youth inclusion, strengthening of local institutional capacity, digital innovations, and also a regionally coordinated solution as vital to social cohesion and conflict prevention. Over the course of 5 years, the project is expected to reach over 1,400 border zone communities in the north of Ghana, with a specific focus on vulnerable village clusters and border areas exposed to conflict and climate risks. The bank also has other programs aimed to address some of the drivers of inequality and deprivation, including improving forest and landscape management, increasing connectivity, and addressing particularly vulnerable communities through social protection programs. So we're also exploring a rural development engagement that would address a range of issues in northern Ghana. But given this webinar series, it is important that we introduce this timely initiative to engage policymakers and development partners to discuss challenges and opportunities for promoting a coordinated development approach in northern Ghana, especially in the 48 SOCO districts. So with this, let me end by expressing the bank's sincere appreciation to the webinar, its organizers, and all of our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. I'd like also to invite Mr. Nicholas Perrin, the task team leader of the regional SOCO project of the World Bank, for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning to all. So yes, thank you. I mean, I will be brief also on my side, because I understand there will be a presentation of the project and the program in northern Ghana as a follow-up. But first, I wanted also to thank our partner in Ghana and the CMU in Ghana to allow us to have this event, because for us it's very important that we present to a larger group a little bit the initiative that is going on in northern Ghana at the moment. The SOCO project in Ghana is part of a coordinated initiative that we are doing also in Côte d'Ivoire, in Togo, and Benin through a regional platform, a regional project, where we are basically, trying to work in. So we start the presentation right away. Okay, no problem. So we are basically trying to think regionally and act locally, and it's an approach that has been launched first in the Lake Chad area. Now I'm in Niger working on a similar approach that we have in what we call the 3 border area in the Sahel, and I would say the last of the family is this project on social cohesion in the northern area of Ghana. And what we are trying to do with these projects is basically to focus on areas which are usually lagging regions, difficult of access, which historically have been, left off the mainstream development because of their geographical, historical situation. And in the case of the SOCO project, is at the border with the Sahel, where a lot of instability, unfortunately, is happening, but also where climate risks are hitting hard. So what we have been trying to do through this project is to look at the fragility drivers of this area and try to re-engage with the government in those places, so build into the national strategies and the national institutions, and try to intervene, both, I would say, on the last mile delivery of infrastructure and services, promote also local economic development, but also work on the processes, because one of the key issues is not just the output, but it's also how do you deliver those outputs. And so these areas are basically sharing the same common feature, lack of social cohesion and trust, limited voice and resilience, especially of vulnerable groups, so usually it will be youth, women, but also, farmers and pastoralists. And because of the distances and the history, in some cases, it's difficult for the institution to reach out there. So the program is basically a response to all this. So I understand I'm doing the presentation. So then this gets, yeah, the next slide. Thank you. So what we've been trying to come up with the government on this is an approach that is coordinated across the 4 countries. And we'll be focusing on these fragile hotspots. As I said, in the Lake Chad, it was more for recovery. In the Sahel, it's more to remain engaged despite the violence and extremism that is there. In the case of the northern part of the Gulf of Guinea, it's more prevention. It's basically to build the resilience of communities and institutions towards the multiple threat of fragility that they are facing. So we do that by trying to develop with each government strategy to work on a people-centered investment through a community and local development approach. And we do that across the countries. The idea is to coordinate across countries so that you don't have this effect of a lot of investment in one area, but as soon as you cross the border, nothing happens. So what we are trying to do is to have a coordinated approach, but build that into national systems, so local institutions that exist, trying to reinforce them, trying to also support the effort of local planning and national planning as we do so. The idea by doing that is to have an integrated local level resilience action in that area. So we are building in, in the diagnostic of needs, the climate dimension as well, so that, people can identify what are the risks that they are facing, but also have mechanisms to identify the possible answer to those risks. And I think we'll work also quite a lot on the articulation between the local response, local-led action in terms of climate resilience, but also the national programmation, so that, we give legs, I would say, to these national strategies and vice versa. As I said, this project is on prevention, so social cohesion is very important. So we try to focus a lot on the definition of what do we mean by social cohesion. So we are trying to work on bonding, bridging, and linking. What does it mean? It means that we're trying to work within the communities on basically the link, the bonding between the different parts of the communities. It can be women and men, it can be youth and older generation, it can be different various groups within a community, so that the planning process is a way to do that. Then we also work on the bridging inter-community. So we have a cluster approach, and Ashutosh will develop that further than me, where we are trying to identify, investment or local economic development activities that can benefit for several groups of people and make them work together. And then also very important, trying to work on that link between institution and the people that they are supposed to represent, so that you reinforce the trust. And finally, the very important part, and that's part of what we do today, there is a very important knowledge management dimension into this project. So we are developing, we are supporting with the government, national institutions to collect data, to reflect about some of the key issues of the area. In order to give good answers, you need to ask good questions. And that's basically why we are doing this knowledge management, is to basically boost the capacity and the dialogue locally so that we can collect data, collect ideas, and then ask the good questions to try to have good answers. So that's also a very important part. And this is one of the things that we are doing here today, is to start that process. Next slide. I mean, the security. So this is basically what I said. You have the map on the right that shows you more or less, the area. I mean, it's about 80% of the north of Ghana that we are covering in the case of Ghana with that project. So this project is also multi-sectorial, as I said, because it has a community-led development approach. So it can play a role of catalyst, with other partners, like other donors and NGOs. We are trying to work with them through the government, because we also basically are fully integrated into the national strategy and programs, and also within the bank. That's what we are doing also in Côte d'Ivoire, because usually we are the first bank project in that area. We can become, the platform also to basically help further projects or initiatives to be implemented in the area, and we are fully staffed to do so because we are basically working on existing institutions that are already operating in the area. So you have here, the table with the different envelope per country. You can see that Ghana is substantial, as Côte d'Ivoire is. This is a regional project. For those who are not familiar with regional project, is that what you have when you are working on a regional project, you are mobilizing some national IDA. And because you have a regional project, that gives you access to an extra window that allows you to have the double of what you mobilize nationally, and gives you basically a bigger envelope that you can use nationally, but with this vision of a regional outcome, if you want. Next slide, please. Voilà. So, I mean, as I said, I mean, my few words to finish. The idea, if you want, for us is to basically introduce you to the concept of this project, to present it, but also to reiterate that this is a project that is multi-sectorial and doesn't have the objective of doing everything. What we want to have is basically open to partnerships, open to dialogue, and use basically the capacity of this project to generate discussion, dialogue, but also to be used as a catalyst sometimes in some key issues. And I think it's an important thing to remember. We will basically focus a lot on local planning, on local mobilization, on dialogue, interagencies as well, to understand what we can do, what we cannot do, but maybe others can do as well. We basically, and Ashutosh will discuss this, and my colleagues as well, we hopefully can deploy quickly as well, because we are using the system existing, and that allows us to cover the last mile and the outreach going into parts of Ghana where it's difficult to go. It's important for us to do both the last mile, but also to leave no one behind. So as part of the processes of this local planning, we will pay special attention to the quality of the community participation and the outreach to vulnerable groups. And then the last part that I already mentioned, this knowledge management dimension, which is very important. This project will generate a lot of data, or will basically help to generate a lot of data, and will also support a lot the knowledge exchange. This is the DNA of that project, both in Ghana, but also regionally, and I could say even internationally. I mean, I started in my opening words to explain, how it fits into a broader series of projects, but also, globally into an approach that we call community and local development. And this project, falls into this big family, and we hope that we will generate a lot of knowledge. And hopefully, because of this project and this outreach and focusing, I would say, on some vulnerable groups, we will also contribute to the national strategy on climate change. For example, on the women economic empowerment, but also, just as I said, to give legs to some of these national strategy by basically relaying them also at the local level through the local planning. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's why I'm calling from this office. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for your opening your remarks, Mr. Perrin. I'd like to then introduce to call on Mr. Ashutosh Raina, the task team leader for Ghana SOCO project World Bank, to provide a brief introduction of the Ghana SOCO project. Mr. Ashutosh.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abdullahi. I would first like my colleague, George Aidu, who is the project coordinator for the Ghana SOCO project, to talk about the SOCO project, and then I will add a few points at the end. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. Good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon.
The Ghana SOCO project is part of a regional project which we have already been told
Sorry, George, I think you are muted. Can you unmute yourself, George?
Okay.
No, he's not muted, but maybe a little bit far away from the mic. I can hear his voice.
Okay. Is it okay now? Is it better?
Yes, yes, George, we can hear you.
Yes, yes, we can hear you, George. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. The Ghana Northern Regions Social Cohesion Project, SOCO, is part of a regional project being financed by the International Development Agency of the World Bank. And the Ghana component is $150 million. The project is basically focused in the 6 northern regions of Ghana, namely the northern region, northeast, Oti, Savannah, Upper East. 48 districts are benefiting from the project. West region has 11 of the project, Upper East, 15 district assemblies participate, Northeast, 6 district assemblies, Savannah region 4, and Oti region 4. Let me just mention that the project has adopted the community-driven development approach to deliver all the community access, and the communities will be involved in the sub-project identification, planning, and implementation to give meaning to the CTD approach. The implementing agency is the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, with NDPC as an collaborating agency, as well as the Ministry of Youth and Sports. The project components are as follows. Component 1 is investing in community resilience and inclusion. And the amount involved is $112.5 million, which is about 75% of the financing budget. It aims basically to support people to fully participate in their local government activities through the financing of local level investments to promote inclusive and resilient communities. Component 1 is subdivided into 3. Subcomponent 1 is community investment for strengthening local resilience and inclusion. Basically, this subcomponent is to support increasing access to community-level climate resilient and socioeconomic infrastructure by financing investments for the construction, rehabilitation, and upgrading or equipment of community infrastructure. Component 1.2 is strategic economic investments for climate resilient economic development. And basically, it aims to create both short and long-term benefits to existing economic sources of resilience. It will finance the rehabilitation of existing rural markets and the development of economic activities to generate local employment and income. Component 1.3 is youth engagement and social cohesion. It aims basically to unite and empower the youth with a voice and agency to prioritize and implement investments that will allow them to play positive roles in fostering social cohesion. It will finance social cohesion activities and events, rehabilitate, upgrade, and equip cluster-level community infrastructure which have been identified and prioritized by the youth. Component 2 is building foundation and capacity for inclusive and resilient communities. The component will support training and capacity building activities which are aimed at strengthening the capacity of all stakeholders at the various levels. And the success of component 1 hinges on component 2. So it's a very, very important and vital component. The third component I want to talk about and move on will be component 3. That is the regional, component 3 is the regional coordination platform and dialogue. Basically, it seeks to improve regional coordination among the 4 targeted countries and also to promote a coordinated response to fragility, conflict, and violence, as well as climate-related challenges. It will fund the regional coordination platform, which will focus on 3 pillars. 1, data collection and analysis. 2, knowledge generation. And lastly, dialogue platform. Next slide, please. I just want to take you through the key milestones to date. Well, the project received a board's approval on 31st of March 2022. It has already gotten the cabinet and parliamentary approvals, and the financing agreement was signed in August 2022, precisely on August 22nd, 2022. The project effectiveness was declared on 25th of October 2022. Currently, all the 48 district assemblies have completed their sensitization program. Key project staff have been recruited. The project implementation manual has been prepared. The annual work plan and budget has also been prepared. The project was officially launched in Ghana on the 25th of November 2022 by His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Alhaji Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia. Implementation activities have started in all the districts, and I must add that there's a strong political support for the successful implementation of the project at all levels of government, at the national and the sub-national levels. There's also a deepened multi-sector collaboration on the project. I seek to ask to continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Dr. Abdullahi, let me finish the last slide and then we'll request you to start the panel discussion. So I just want to highlight, as Nicola Perrin talked about the regional aspects of thinking regionally and locally, and George talked about the work that government is doing under SOCO project in terms of providing socioeconomic services in the northern Ghana. I would like to focus on a dimension which is related to component 3 of knowledge management, and where we are trying to see how the project can act as a catalyst to provide more coordinated support in collaboration with Northern Development Authority, National Development, National Development Planning Commission, and all the various major development partners who are operating in the northern Ghana. So, so there are 3 areas where we are working on, where the project is working on, and we think the project can greatly contribute towards the more coordinated and integrated development in northern Ghana. And I would like to also say that that SOCO project is being implemented in 48 districts, which is almost 80% of the districts covered in North. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to provide more support on the coordinated action side. So the first thing the SOCO project is doing, it has had a lot of discussions with NDA and all the major development partners, including UN and USAID, which are joining this discussion today, but also with FCDO, with Canada, with UN, UNICEF, World Food Program, and several other partners. And the idea was that there are already a lot of initiatives and projects right now going on in northern Ghana. And one of the things we are realizing is that most of these projects are happening in a very ad hoc, fragmented manner. So there was a need for looking at a more coordinated way of doing a scoping of who is doing what type of projects are going on, but more importantly, what are the challenges and opportunities for us to do a more coordinated way of working and building on what already exists. So there's a scoping study that is led by the National Development Planning Commission. It started in August 2022, and we're expecting this study to be done by April. The study is being done in collaboration with various development partners and NDA, and this report will be shared with all the stakeholders sometime around April next year. The other initiative that the project is supporting is the formation of digital knowledge platform through which all the different research and resource that is existing on northern Ghana by various partners who are operating there would be made available online. So that it reduces the cost of discovery and it helps us to build on what already research has been done and plan based on where the need is, more research is required. The third area we are doing is supporting a webinar series. Today is our first webinar, and the idea behind the series is to get all the different partners and experts and policymakers and practitioners together to discuss issues in the North and figure out having a platform for dialogue and discussion so that we can find a way forward together. And in addition to that, with the development partners, the Ministry of Local Government is planning to have a workshop in April 2023 to discuss a framework for coordination and action in partnership with NDA and other partners that will help us to plan how we want to move and implement the project in 48 districts in a more coordinated manner. And there will also be, there's also plan to organize a conference focused on Northern Ghana in collaboration with NDA and other partners so that this becomes a platform for a lot of stakeholders to get together and work together in North. And lastly, the project is also developing a partnership with the University of Business and Integrated Development Studies in the North, through which we'll be able to engage students from the university to collect data every year. For these students are going to spend 1 month in the communities to collect data. And this data will be, we will have a digital app through which we'll collect the data from all the 48 districts. And this data will be very useful for informing not only SOCO project, but also for other initiatives that are required in these districts and will help actually also on the local development planning as well. So these are some of the initiatives that SOCO project is working with all the major partners together as a catalyst to help strengthen the coordinated development along with Northern Development in North. The second area where the SOCO project is implementing along with a lot of partners is a pilot on local economic development and rural development in select districts within SOCO, with the idea that in the next 2 to 3 years, an intensive approach will be developed in these districts to develop a model and a proof of concept for local economic development, integrated rural development that then could be replicated through the SOCO project in all the 48 districts over the next 5 years. And also these districts will become our innovation hubs, where we'll try to pilot a number of initiatives with development partners together and develop local economic development platforms, which can enable us to develop public-private partnerships. Again, a lot of the work that we'll be doing under this will also be very instrumental in forming future rural development engagement that is being planned in Northern Ghana. And in addition, lastly, we are under the project, we are also doing several deep dives and innovations around social cohesion, climate resilience, cross-border initiatives on digital technology innovations, on youth and women's economic empowerment, and on the social risk management. So there are a lot of people involved in the project, and all these initiatives are done in collaboration with different partners and agencies, so that we can develop a more coordinated approach in North. Let me stop here, and I will, back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these opening remarks and your introductory comments. They are very, very helpful. So I'd now take this opportunity to welcome to the fireside, due to the fireside chat. And we have our panelists here, Mr. Samuel Seth Pasa, Director, Local Governance and Decentralization, Dr. Hippolyte Poole, Board Member of the Northern Development Authority, Angeline Ngujo, I hope I've got the spelling right, Peace and Development Advisor at the UN, and Peter Edu, Development Coordination Officer, UN, and Mr. Jason Smith, Director, Democracy, Rights and Governance Office of USAID. So welcome to you, panelists. I'd like to, we have the first side, there will be 5 to 6 rounds of questions. And in each round, I will ask the question to the lead respondent, and they will get 3 to 4 minutes to respond to the question. After their response, I will then ask other panelists if they would like to respond to the same question. And the non-lead respondents will get a minute to respond to the question. I also encourage the participants to, if you have any questions, to write those on the platform, on the chat platform, so that these will be collated and sent to the panel as necessary. Thank you very much. So the first round 1, the first question is, what needs to be done to ensure this intervention, that's the SOCO project, leads to transformational change in the north of Ghana? And for this, I would like to call upon Dr. Hippolyte to respond to this question. What needs to be done to ensure this intervention, that's the SOCO project, leads to transformational change in the north of Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is Hippolyte Paul from the Institute for Peace and Development. I'm here on behalf of the NDA Board of Directors. The question that has been put is, what needs to be done to ensure that the SOCO project leads to transformational development? You know, when I think about that in the context of this webinar's theme, which is coordination, I like to point out that the effective coordination starts from a shared vision. If we do not have a shared vision of what you want to do, coordination is going to be almost impossible. Talking about a vision then reminds me of the vision that Gorgesberg, one of the last governors of Ghana, had, which was a dream of the North as the breadbasket of the country, from which he saw trains loads of cattle, cereals, and other goods rolling down to the south and to the coast and beyond. You know, I think that vision is very important, that we begin to look at the North beyond what it is now, which is the recipient of aid, to a major player in the economy of Ghana. And so we need to look at how do you leverage the resources and the technology that SOCO is bringing to make sure that we upscale activities, agricultural production and productivity in particular, you know, to ensure that people who are in this part of the country begin to see the benefits of that. Now, to do that, I see the SOCO project as a seed in the sense that it sows the seeds for more things to grow in the future and under it. It should not be the end to it. That's why it's going to be critically important to have a long-term vision of what needs to be done. And in that what needs to be done, I think that there are at least 6 principles that I have identified that should guide the implementation of this project. Principle number 1 is that we need to reimagine and rebrand the North as a peaceful and investable area. One of the things that has happened to the North is that it's characterized by conflicts, recurrent, protracted conflicts, and now we see the incipient arrival of violent extremists from neighboring countries. You cannot expect anybody to invest in the North in the long term when there are no guarantees of peace, security, and safety for their investments. Therefore, what do we need to do to rebrand the North? First, as people of the North, and I come from the North, I've lived all my life in Tamale, we need to rebuild or consolidate the peace that we have in the places that we are not having active conflicts. And we also need to develop and sustain peace building in areas that are still experiencing conflicts. And then package the peace that we achieve and market that. One of the things that we forget is that peace in itself is an investable commodity. That if you can package your peace, you can attract investment. And I take the example of Morocco, which 10, 15 years ago, when they began to champion an industrialization program, the first thing they marketed was the peace of the country, the stability of the country. If Northern Ghana can do that and demonstrate that we have a peaceful environment that can guarantee security, safety of investments, then that is what is going to make people begin to do that. And so to do that means we need to be able to prevent the arrival of external sources of violence as well, while protecting the violence within. Principle number 2 is that we must let the past instruct the future. What do I mean by this? The North has witnessed a lot of investments of this kind over the years. At least in my very short lifespan, I've seen URADEB, I've seen NORIB, I've seen FASCUM, I've seen so many other projects that have come and gone, and we have little to demonstrate for lasting sustainability of the interventions that they were supposed to create. So we need then to look beyond that and see how do we craft a vision that is inclusive, that is long-term, and looks beyond ethnicity, looks beyond politics and political cycles. I emphasize political cycles because we have a country where everything seems to revolve around who gets elected in the next 4 years. But we have to have an agenda that goes beyond that. And then we also have to go beyond our past, our historical past, the conflicts that affected us in the past. We need to go beyond that so that we can rebrand and recreate. And then promote entrepreneurial approaches to how we go about business. I think we need to go beyond a point where we see development as the bringing of resources into a place, so that we become recipients of resources rather than active partners and creators, co-creators of the development initiative. So I would say that we need to separate issues of charity from business, that this must be business and not charitable approaches. And we need to go beyond the putting things in traditional groups to looking at family businesses, looking at collective businesses, and looking at private sector businesses that can actually champion this. So the interventions that we do, especially in the area of local economic development, must begin to see how do we stipulate, how do we mobilize and stimulate these kind of growth areas, And in fact, we need to emphasize merit-based approaches to resource allocation. We have a situation where we have entitlement mentality.
Doc, sorry, your time. I just wondering, you have principles. How many principles you said? Just 6. I will let you that your time. You have 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay.
So if you go to the principles, you can share your notes with us later. Please continue.
Yeah. So the next principle is think big, think bold, and think strategic. We need to identify investments that are big, bold, and strategic, and not just small things that we do from a shopping list. The 4th one is let the people lead. Let the people lead. The intervention is talking about people-centered approaches, but I'm talking about people-led approaches. People must lead. The fifth one is focus on interests, not issues, not interventions. If you come and ask me what I want, I'm going to give you a long list of things that I want, but what is my real interest? Because identifying interest is going to help us identify interconnections between different groups, between different regions, between different businesses, and then create the interdependencies that make people cherish and protect the peace. And finally, we need to look beyond the RCCs and MMDAs as the coordinating mechanisms, because as good as they are, they tend to operate in parallels. You know, each one its own vertical ladder towards the Accra. But we need a structure or a mechanism that brings all of this together. And that's where I think the role of the NGA is very important, it's very critical. You know, how do we create that platform where it's a one-stop shop that everybody can go to for ideas, for information, for data, you know, and facilitate connections and everybody else, you know. So that coordinating mechanism beyond the RCCs is very important. So Chairman, since you say I have very few minutes, I'll stop here and then we can continue later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, sorry for coming into, I think it's just because of the time. So anyway, thank you very much. Do we have any of the other panelists wanting to chip in something for 1 minute? Any of the other panelists? Okay, then let's move on to straight to the second question, which is round 2. And that question is, to ensure that this transformation happens, how do we strengthen coordination and collaboration at regional coordinating council and MMDA levels in northern Ghana? And this one, I would like to invite Mr. Samuel Passa, to help us with the response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So as the question goes, to strengthen coordination and collaboration to ensure success of this project, 3 things are needed. We needed to have what we call the scoping mission. First, within the enclave that the projects are, what is the blueprint to guide the project, which is tying in with the log frame of the project and the PDO of the project. 2, there should be a certain conscious effort to build the RCC's capacity in terms of logistical support. It is sometimes we overflock the issue of capacity, thinking that competencies do not exist. But you cannot have competencies without resources. And the principle of decentralization is funds follow functions. So there is a need to provide adequate support in terms of logistics to enable them. And it could be innovative ways of monitoring, tracking performance of LNG using digital approaches, georeferencing, and then the issue of knowledge management, critical. You cannot continue to do a lot of things without having a repository of that information at a certain place. And the SOCO principle or the focus of SOCO is to have a knowledge management especially. And I think that going forward, for programs and projects in the northern part of Ghana to be more impactful, we should be able to have a certain information, which we call knowledge management, that people can reference and say, this had been the success so far. Finally, I think that there is the need to do impact assessment of all interventions that have happened over the years. So we can learn. We do a lot of monitoring, supervision, but what is the impact of the MAE? It is that brings about decision making. We call something evidence-based decision making. It is only going to happen when you do continuous impact assessment of our programs and projects, because that is the missing link in our development conversation. because people are not able to have what progress we have made. So we duplicate, we do the same things over the time, thinking that we are not achieving. So we are making progress, but we are not able to show progress because assessment of those programs and projects leaves much to be desired. So I think these are the things that are, and then the last I'll put on is deepening intersector agency and DP collaboration. You cannot be working in a fragmented manner. So as this project comes on, USAID is on board, UNDP is on board, World Bank is on board, even development agencies across the country who are working in those parts of the country must all be on the same page so that we avoid duplication of our effort, because resources are not, they become, but there's also resources are limited. The fiscal space is low, so we cannot be duplicating and be wasting resources. So we need to be efficient or judicious in the use of our resources to make sure that the aspirations and the needs of our people are met. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, within time, you have about a minute of unused time, so you can store it for future purposes. Any addition from the other panelists? Anybody wants to add to the response?
Yes, I would like to, Chairman, if you permit me.
Sure, please go on.
Yeah, well, I think in addition to all the things that Samuel has said, a critical piece that we need to pay attention to be the changes in mindsets in terms of how do we approach the management of resources put at our disposal. You know, having been in this country for all this while, I've seen projects that have come, resources have been provided, the way they are used and how and so forth leaves much to be desired. You know, when we see resources project, in fact, a project or it's almost equivalent to get a new vehicle, get a new motorcycle, and that's the end of it. So until we change our mindsets, no amount of resource injections can change anything for us. And I think that's going to be critical. How do we change the mindsets of those who are going to be involved in implementation so that effectiveness, efficiency, accountability become watchwords in what they do? That's what I would like to add.
Thank you very, very much. That is really helpful. Okay, so without, if there are no other questions, can we move on to round 3, the third question? And the third question is, how do we strengthen, broaden, and sustain partnerships through multi-stakeholder engagement? And that is to say, the public and private sector to initiate a holistic and comprehensive multi-sectoral and multi-partner responses to avoid silos and the creation of silos and all those sort of things. And here we'd like to call on Mr. Peter Edu of the UN office, from the UN office.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So my name is Peter Edu, as mentioned, and economist with the United Nations Resident Coordinators Office. So related to the question, practically at the core of sustaining and building partnerships is relationship management. But before then, how do you manage these relationships? The fundamentals must be gotten right. The first is, who are your partners? When you pick the development cooperation landscape or development landscape, you are looking at stakeholders within the sector, the public, and in this case, the public sector, in this case, the Regional Coordinating Council, the Northern Development Authority, the National Development Planning Commission, all of them within the public sector are responsible for development projects in the sector and the policy coordination. Then we are looking at the private sector, who are within the space as well. We are looking at businesses, large-sized businesses, medium-sized, small-scale. We are looking at both those in the domestic economy and those international as well. Beyond that, we have other people who may be people who speak for the voiceless. And these are relevant stakeholders like the CSOs, think tanks, the academia, who also add up to the partners. You broaden it up and you put all this within a basket, and then you can call it a multi-stakeholder basket of partners beyond the traditional partnership framework, which deals with your prime stakeholders. So once you have all these, the government sector, the private sector, the CSOs, and all related partners within the sector, related to your thematic area of function, whether you are talking about food systems, whether you are talking about security, whether you are talking about economic transformation, all the thematic areas, you have all these stakeholders scoped and analyzed within a basket. Then you have a clear view of who your partners are. After defining your partners, then you need to understand them and scope out their key roles. If you don't, you run the risk of creating conflict within the sector. You may find yourself engaging somebody for WASH, maybe engaging let me pick the UN, for instance, engaging UNDP for WASH, when indeed we have the UNICEF that is really a place and position to handle WASH matters. Maybe engaging UNFPA for women issues, when indeed we have UN Women to handle it. So you need to clarify the roles of all stakeholders and be clear in your minds. And then you place them where you are and how you can approach them. That is understanding the roles of your partners. The third point I want to bring on board is that your partnership should create value. You are not just relating and engaging. The first speakers have talked about effective coordination and demonstrating impact and outcomes. You are not just engaging people, engaging the public sector, engaging the private sector, the businesses, and then the financial institutions, engaging the civil society just for engaging sake. You are engaging to ensure that the objectives of the northern development, northern sector is really going to be achieved. Vis-a-vis the core of the issues relating to handling peace and security issues. You are engaging to ensure you achieve impact. So I've spoken about defining your partners, understanding their roles as a second point. And the third point is ensuring that your partnership creates value. At the core of these three is to manage relationships. Beyond engaging your partners and securing their buy-in to push forward your priorities or development objectives, you need to manage the relationship. You just don't keep it there and make it a one-off activity. There should be more like a coordination mechanism within your partnership framework that ensures that there is regular engagement, either quarterly, biannually, or annually, if you are running a medium-term scope of a project or medium-term policy management, then you are doing it maybe biannually or annually. If it's a short-term project, then you are doing it quarterly. Engagement with your stakeholders to demonstrate or showcase to them what their partnership is bringing on board. You need to manage that relationship. The other core element of these three is also to say that your communication strategy should be clear. You should really have effective and free communication with all your partners. The next thing you know, USAID is working on resilient systems, livelihood empowerment in the northern sector, and then you have WFP also working on livelihood empowerment in the northern sector. You may have FAO working on irrigation systems, and you also have IFAD also working on irrigation systems. You need to have clear communication strategy and priorities and be able to coordinate them in a way that you avert duplications and you rather build synergies. That secures the partnerships that you have already. And so for me, this is how I'll put all in place. And then I want to conclude and say that partnership should be handled with a corporate approach. A corporate approach uses partnerships, multi-sector partnership, as a key tool to survive. And in the public sector, because we are dealing with a project or a medium-term project that is working for the public sector, the northern sector, then the Northern Development Authority, the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, and all the government sector should take partnership as a serious business and address it with a corporate mindset, such that you manage your risk factors, share of information, fluid communication, and you ensure that you are always fluidly engaging your partners and avoiding duplication and promoting synergies amongst partners. And then also demonstrating value all the time within the process. Adopt partnership as a corporate strategy and be serious with your stakeholder partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Any additions? You know, the other panelists.
Yes.
Anybody want to
I
add?
have an addition.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Please go on.
From what has been said, I just want to add on to the fact that there is also the need to look at the SDGs and look at the Goal 17, which is talking about development cooperation. And development cooperation is also talking about aid effectiveness. And there is the need to look at country systems, direct implementation of programs and projects by DPs versus using the country systems to deliver. And our country system, we have the local government system, the national level, that is engagement, that is talking about relationships. You have to have that partnership, which is spending. And then at the regional level, we have the regional coordinating council, the district level, we have the district assembly that are the implementing authority. And then you have the district substructures, which I did not talk about. For SOCO to succeed, the substructures must be functional. And the substructures are the conduits for development. They have direct relationships with the citizens, and there's a need to strengthen them as we go along. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Any other addition?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Adlan. Sure.
Yes, Chairman, I have 2 points. The first one is
sure,
that the issue about stakeholders. I agree with Patrick that we need to identify the stakeholders, but I think the criteria for identifying stakeholders will be very important. Because as you and I know, when there's a party, even the vultures come as stakeholders. You know, so when people smell money, they're going to come as stakeholders. But the question becomes, what interest do they have, and what costs are they prepared to incur to be part of the stakeholder system? Are they only coming to benefit from it, or they're just coming to, they have a contribution to make? The other point that Patrick raised was the issue about dispersal of interventions, where WFP is doing something here and USAID is doing something there and so forth. I think one of the things that we need to look at is, how do we concentrate and saturate interventions so that we can see meaningful impact in some areas? What is the point spending $500,000 in one corner, another $500,000 in another corner, and at the end of the day, we have very little to show? Whereas probably if you put all that together in one place, then you have something that can demonstrate effects, can demonstrate potential, and we can build on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll now move to round 4. And the question is, how do we demonstrate lasting impacts through effective monitoring, evaluation, and learning mechanisms? And I'll call on my sister Angeline of the UN office.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm clear enough. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me try to respond in 3 points. We talk of effective monitoring. What does it do? Effective monitoring generates data. Somebody said earlier that, you know, studies, there will be some field studies to gather some data within the SOCO project. I think it's, and as much as data is very important to improve the programming, to feed back into the monitoring and evaluation process, it is also good to streamline the data that we want. Because, and as we know, Ghana has a good, well-functioning national data infrastructure. I think the first thing I would suggest is to work closely with the national data infrastructure to be able to address the data gaps that we have. We know we have data, but in some parts it's not enough. So if we don't have quality data, we'll also not be able to do proper M&E, and also on the other side, also bring out, more information which can fit into the project as we go along. So I will, the advice would be really to harmonize the existing data. And as we know, there have been quite a series of mappings which were done. NDA also did one in the course of the drafting of its medium-term development strategy. The UN also started a mapping on what development partners are doing in the North. And now if another mapping is coming, I think it would be really good, one, to harmonize all that data so that at the end we have a document which is comprehensive enough to state exactly who is doing, who is working where. And this will also be a win-win for everybody, because not only do we have that credible data which can fit now into the policy making process, but also help us as development partners to be able to position ourselves in a more strategic, complementary and coordinated way in the field. So the other issue also will be to strengthen the accountability framework. Part of the M&E system, it only goes well when there is that community, there's a grassroots level involvement. So it will be good to be able to see the aspect empowering communities being part of it, being part of the decision-making processes, being able to have that social contract between the communities and the duty bearer to be able to hold them accountable and also foster the delivery on the policy. Because if we see, the other point also is that the whole framework has to be adaptive. As we see, the context is evolving. A year ago, the conversation on the Gulf of Guinea was virtually inexistent, but now it has become one of the very crucial elements of programming, and also on the political front and security front, where everybody sees that there's a need to work in a way to even stop the southward drive of terrorist organization, and also look into this, addressing the governance gaps, which actually are drivers of the fragility that we know along the northern coast. Then the final point also here is that it would be good at the end to keep in mind, as development partners, that our interventions should be supporting the government to deliver on its priorities, because sometimes we are so focused on spending the money that we don't really think very much on where we are going, why we are here. So at the end, we should always keep in mind that whatever we are doing, one, we need the local ownership. It's good that the project is implemented with the Ministry of Local Government. But the other issue, what are the other strands of government who are also part of it? And if we streamline the chain of implementation, where we see also the institutional framework being consulted, being also included, then we will be able not only to have an effective monitoring, but also do a monitoring which will give us credible data also to not only for positioning, but even see the impactful interventions that we'll be designing for our communities in the North and in OT region. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angeline. Do we have any follow-up responses on M&E and learning? Okay.
Yeah, I think I want to add on to the M&E. I think we need to move away from the conventional way of doing M&E, rather than so as to move. We should rather move to participatory M&E, where we exert accountability using social accountability tools. So in that way, the citizens are also involved in the monitoring of programs and projects at the various levels. So I think that going forward, we should be thinking about not only the conventional way of monitoring, but using the social accountability approaches and then participatory monitoring evaluation so as to achieve some results. So in that way, we will have a certain ownership, especially using the traditional authorities, civil society organizations, opinion leaders, women and youth in all this process. Then you can get correct feedback for these programs and projects.
Thank you very much for that comment. Okay, we now move to round 6, which is, oh no, sorry, round 5. And that is on what role do you see for development partners who wish to support this transformational agenda in Northern Ghana? What role do we see for DPs? And I'll call on Mr. Jason Smith of USAID, Director of the Democracy, Rights and Development Office. Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Ashutosh and the representatives from the National Development Authority and the Ministry of Local Governance and Rural Development, and the members on the panel from the UN family for including me in this conversation. I've been listening with interest and taking notes on the discussion so far, and with regard to the question that I am addressing, what role do we see for development partners? I will offer perhaps 3 suggestions, recognizing that this is not likely to be a surprise to any of the others on the panel who know Ghana much better than I do. But I just want to suggest these for the development partners as being things to think about as we try to evaluate our role with regard to this project and with our activities in Northern Ghana and the question of coordination. The first one, I think Mr. Samuel mentioned clearly, and others have talked about it as well, is that Ghanaians should really be in the lead, and donors should recognize that and seek that out. And by that, I mean, both the Ghanaian authorities and local organizations and, ultimately citizens in the country who are taking ownership of their development and addressing this threat posed to the social cohesion in Ghana. And then another important concept that I would promote is the importance of working through existing mechanisms. And I'll mention some potential mechanisms, and I'm sure that others on the call are also aware of some. And then thirdly, I'll just mention the importance of an ongoing dialogue as donors are trying to understand what role they can play, what other activities are underway. And as Dr. Samuel mentioned early on, or Mr. Samuel mentioned from the Ministry of Local Governance, about just the long-term vision and making sure that we understand clearly and others understand clearly what that looks like and how we can fit into it. So in order to have that dialogue, I think, we talked a little bit about the important partners there, and I think we've hit on quite a few of them, at least that I'm aware of. Certainly the Ministry of Local Governance, certainly the Northern Development Authority, and as well, I think, the already been mentioned, but the MMDAs and the regional coordinating councils are quite important. I think it's also important to include as much as possible the INGOs who are active currently in Ghana, and certainly the civil society organizations, both based in Accra and in the north. I think it probably goes without saying, but we're also mindful of the traditional authorities, including the national and the regional houses of chiefs, as important people to dialogue with, as well as the national and the regional peace councils. And then with regard to, existing mechanisms for this ongoing dialogue, I would mention a couple that come to my mind, at least, that I'm aware of. One would be for development partners, the Preventing Violent Extremism or Countering Violent Extremism Donor Working Group, and that's currently coordinated by the Netherlands, by the Dutch embassy. And so that could be a good venue for enhanced coordination. A second venue that I would suggest is the governance donor working group that actually USAID is currently coordinating. And then I'm aware of at least two other working groups that might be relevant, focused on decentralization and focused on accountability and anti-corruption. With decentralization, that's led by the German embassy, and with the anti-corruption working group that is currently being led by the UK High Commission. So those are some suggestions that I would make. I am also aware, although it hasn't been discussed, but there is a national technical committee associated with the SOCO project that apparently is another opportunity for development partners to engage in Ghana in order to understand the objectives of the SOCO activity, at sort of a technical level, and that could also inform some of the development partners' actions, over the life of this activity. As I know that many other organizations or development partners that have been mentioned are also considering support. I think Ashutosh has also discussed the importance of the avoidance of silos. And I appreciate the fact that the World Bank SOCO activity is quite multi-sectoral and also regional, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I know that for development partners, that can sometimes pose a bit of a challenge if we are very siloed ourselves and thinking sectorially. But at least on the part of USAID, we're trying to view it with a much more holistic approach.
At this time, all personnel should
I
secure
apologize for the interruption.
Make their way to the third floor safe haven areas. If you're in the chancery,
in closing, let me just say that I appreciate the opportunity to join the panel and
follow all directions from our internal security team.
and
If you are in the GSO building,
look
please
forward
make
to
your way
further
the gym.
dialogue
Everyone should be moving to the safe havens now.
with all of the stakeholders of this activity as we try to ensure that we have good coordination in this respect. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much. Any follow-up comments?
Yes, Chairman, I do have a comment.
Please go on.
Yeah. So I'm on the list of potential partners that have been listed from the community level. I think one important element that we've missed out is the faith-based organizations. There was a time in northern Ghana where they literally ran the show. They provided the water, they provided healthcare, they provided agricultural extension services. They did everything. These institutions have a penetration that governments don't have. They have a permanency that governments don't have because they outlast political parties and governments and so forth. And yet somehow they provide very essential services. They used to in the past, but now if we forget them, we might be shooting ourselves in the foot because basically they are in places where the INGOs and the civil society organizations don't go. They outlive funding cycles more than civil society organizations do, and they have a commitment that goes beyond project funding. So I think we should think critically about including them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other additions?
Yes, maybe I want to add on. Hi.
Sure.
Yes, so just to add on that, with the heads of cooperation, we, led by the UN and as the chair of the heads of cooperation, we have done a mapping of all development partner activities in the northern sector. And the mapping, though not quite completed, demonstrated over 123 programs being implemented by 18 DPs in the 5 northern regions. And we are in the process of updating this map to ensure that we build synergies. We support all projects and programs in a way that we avoid duplications, learning from the experiences of active participation of INGOs in the sector in the past years. Key partners, development partners whose program we mapped, who contributed to this mapping: USAID, Switzerland, COICA, JICA, FCDO, 18 of them. And you could see that in the mapping, 60 projects are in the Savannah region, 82 in the Upper West, 105 in the Northern region, 57, in the Northeast region, 79, Upper East region. There is a compelling cause for us to really collaborate effectively and support building of synergies and complementarities in our efforts. And I think with the UN being the current chair of the Heads of Cooperation, we are pulling together our effort to ensure that we do this to support the northern sector. Just to bring that on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we can move to round 6. And the question is, the SOCO project is planning an intensive local economic development and integrated rural development pilot in a few districts. Can a coordinated development approach be tested and pioneered in these districts in the next 2 years to develop a proof of concept, which can later be scaled up in all SOCO districts? And for that, we call on Mr. Samuel.
No, sorry, I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying.
Pardon? Sorry.
What you said earlier, please, if you can say it again.
Oh, okay. You didn't hear the question. May I read the question again?
And the network was interrupted. Yes, please.
Yes, the question is that the SOCO project is planning an intensive local economic development and integrated rural development pilot in a few districts. And the question is, can a coordinated development approach be tested and pioneered in these districts in the next 2 years to develop a proof of concept, which can later be scaled up in all SOCO districts?
Yeah, that is possible. Implement a certain interventions and our local economic development, which ties in our local development policy and our rural development policy. And there have been best practices across the world. So talking with the World Bank and the TTL, we want to pilot some of these approaches in some of the selected districts. So once we do that, and we have some gains and some results to show, then we can now replicate in other regions. So it is feasible. As a matter of fact, that is the pursuit of the ministry. As per Local Governance Act 2016 at 936, Section 12, the preoccupation of the local authorities, if I should say, is promoting local economic development. And there is a major trajectory to ensure that there's a lot of employment opportunities for the youth and the women as a matter of fact. So job creation and job opportunities, SMEs promotion, and all those things will be piloted in this proposed district. Once we do that and we see the results, we can show it and demonstrate that all these things, as per the policy and the rural development policy, are feasible in our country, then replicated in all the 48, and eventually can be replicated in 261 districts. I thank you.
Okay, any follow-on question to response to this question? We have 7 minutes, I think, left to the webinar. I don't know whether it's going to be extended or that's the end of that's how much time we have. But yes, I think it's partly because of the initial challenges we had. So I don't know whether the time will be extended or we'll be finishing in 7 minutes.
I also want to just add on to that. I want to add to that. All these interventions that we intend to implement will be policy compliant and national priorities compliant, and that it must be coming, and we intend that it will be coming from the medium-term development plans of the local authorities. So it's not something that we are implementing outside the box or outside what is contained in their medium-term plan, but due to financing gaps, then the SOCO comes in and pick those things using best practices to implement them successfully.
Okay, thank you very much.
So
now, I believe
Dr. Abdullah,
yes.
Just request we can extend it by 5 to 10 minutes so that everybody can finish their remarks. Just a request. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we've had a lot of we had some responses, and I believe we have questions from the participants, which I do not have on hand, but I'd like to find out if there are any other questions the panelists want to make before we open up to get a few questions from the participants before we wrap up and close. Hello, yes. Any questions that have been gleaned from the platforms of the participants?
So there are two questions in the chat. One is by Mohammed Baba on what role will the RCCs play in the SOCO project implementation and how? And another question was related to the digital data initiative where the university students will be engaged. So the question was, can the project coordinate with the Ghana Statistical Services? So these are two questions. And maybe Dr. Abdullah, maybe Samuel Pasa can reply to these questions, given he's leading from the ministry side, if it's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. I just want to premise the conversation on the law, on the legislation. So local governance, as I indicated, section 188 to 190 provides the functions of the RCC. And one of the critical functions of the RCC is to monitor the implementation of all government programs and projects in the local authorities. So the SOCO projects, as per the framework and the design, is to strengthen the capacity of the RCC. When we say RCC, we are talking about regional coordinating councils in all the 6 regions that will monitor routinely the implementation of those projects and give feedback through the zonal coordinating offices, which will be situated in the regional coordinating councils. Then they can give feedback to the national level. Then we can also get the feedback for decision making. All we are saying is that the efficient and effective monitoring of these programs, which are community-driven programs, CDD programs, which are so many, we cannot go to those subcommittees or those substructures to monitor unless we use the regional coordinator. So that is the decentralization at the regional level. And the project will support the RCCs through the zonal coordinating offices and then satellite offices to monitor the implementation of this project and advise as appropriate.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the participants? Okay, I think I can just see a question. Sorry. Yes, please, there's a question of climate change. Let's just get the participants' questions and Dr. Pulu before you come in. I think there's a question, I guess, the flash on the screen about the SOCO and climate change. I don't know if someone can read it because I've not gone into the chat section.
Dr. Abdullah, the question is, how has the SOCO project faced to the climate change challenges in North Ghana? So basically the question is how SOCO project is planning to focus on addressing climate change issues in the North. And another question is on what are the thematic areas of focus of SOCO initiative or is it going to spread across all the social development angles? So these are two questions here.
Excellent. So can we get some responses on the two questions, SOCO and climate change, and the thematic areas?
So am I allowed to allow some of my team members to speak to it?
Yes, please. If whoever is with you,
Okay, then I can call on my colleague Pamela Adolfo to also give insights on the climate change components of the project. So Pamela, if you are there.
Hello, Pamela, are you there? Maybe Pamela is not at her.
Okay, so the project, one of the components of the project is to ensure, that's 1.1, is to ensure climate resilient intervention. Maybe I'm not getting the components well, but the infrastructure is resilient, and that the interventions that we are going to have are going to be touching on programs and some projects that are resilient to climate change. So the issues of vulnerability assessment, the issue of climate, the flooding, droughts, all issues related to climate change, taking cognizance of. So the project is also climate resilient intervention, which ties in with the objective of the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, I should say, and the climate policy of Ghana. But I want to add that as a result of that, there will be climate plan, or if I say a strategy. So the project is making effort to recruit climate change specialists. Climate change specialists that will prepare a climate blueprint that will guide the interventions across the MMDAs. So these specialists will be working with us using country systems, country frameworks, existing climate interventions that the project can leverage on to ensure that we are in sync with the existing interventions, so that we are not duplicating, as I indicated earlier on, so that we just add on, scaling up, moving ahead. And it also ties in with a mechanism Doctor talked about. The mechanism of using country system is the district assemblies performance assessment tool. It's a mechanism that UNCDF has already adopted and agreed and LUCA, and we are thinking of scaling up. So we call on all DPs to use that mechanism to scale up what we are doing already successfully under UNCDF, LUCA, and Green. So the project touches on a lot of things on climate change, and we hope to leverage on existing mechanisms to ensure it happens well. Thank you.
Dr. Abdullah, just one request from my side. Our colleague Elaine Chi from the World Bank is focusing on climate change, and I would request if she can add something on this. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. I was just about to also come in. So I think currently the climate dimension is really integrated throughout the whole project design, as well as in the local development participatory processes. So for example, this includes a climate filter when you're discussing and prioritizing at the community level, climate screening, as well as a guide to inform how the districts can actually incorporate the climate dimensions in the designs of the sub-projects. And we are also building on the existing tools, climate participatory tools, for example, and we're working closely with UNCDF and other organizations as well, NDPC. So we hope to pilot the climate diagnostic tools in terms of the vulnerability profile, as well as participatory climate toolkits. And I think one of the areas that we are looking to deepen is also through the students that Ashutosh mentioned, where they're going down to the villages, the communities for 1 month. So that is where they will also do more in-depth work with the communities and engaging in terms of climate mapping and discussions, so as to inform what kind of climate resilient infrastructure they can include and incorporate as part of the local development planning process. So thanks, and back to you. Thank you.
Okay, hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contribution. Any other questions or additions?
Yes.
Sorry, yes, please. Oh, yes, people, you wanted to add something.
Yes. Chairman, thank you very, very much for the opportunity. From the IPD perspective, where our work is about evaluations and research, I scream a little when I hear about data collection, monitoring, and evaluation, with our specifics, because there is a big distinction between data collection and data consuming. Those who collect the data are not the consumers of the data. A lot can go on there that will not lead to quality information and so forth and so on. We have seen it, and I could give stories about where literally data was manufactured in a conference room to present at that place. I won't go there. So I think that we need to be very careful when we look at that and say, okay, if we are assigning roles for data collection to an institution, do they have the people? Do they have the systems? Or are we going to start to do this from scratch? And if so, what is it that needs to be done to make sure that they have the commitment and in fact the ability to use that data? Because a lot of the time, if you ask for, I've seen education service, Ghana Education Service, health service, and other departments collect data from the districts and transmit them to the national level where they are analyzed. The person collecting the data has no interest, has no commitment, doesn't even know what data they are collecting, why they are collecting it. It can affect the quality of that data that they transmit. So I just want to be careful that we make a distinction between data collection, data consumers. To what extent can we make those who are collecting the data part of the users? If they don't see value in it, then they may not be able to collect the good data and the community. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very, very much. Do we have any other questions before we wrap up? I think if I may do so, I just wanted to come in very quickly in 1 minute to say that in terms of the M&E and learning, one thing that I believe maybe it's not been spoken about, but it's just the relationship between the project and our universities in terms of making sure that we have a very robust system for data collection, analysis, and in terms of horizontal learning and long-term horizontal learning by some of our research institutions within the universities across the 5 northern regions. So I think that's an area that I think we need to look at as well. It's very important to have collaboration with institutions, research sections within these universities that can help give some dynamism and long-term continuity to the research, to the kind of data and analysis and learning that we can foster in this project. So unless somebody has any very pressing comment to make, I'd like to call on to Mariam Papa, I think it is, sorry, Papa, the Chief Director of the Ministry, to give us the closing remarks. To Madam, you are welcome.
Hello. So, hello.
Yes,
hello?
yes, please go on.
So I'm sorry, unfortunately, the chief director is in a meeting at the parliament. She joined, but we are defending our budget. We are wrapping up. So basically, takeaways from the ministry is that we must ensure that our country systems are used for development intervention implementation. 2, we must also deepen intersector agency DP collaboration going forward. We must also strengthen the partnerships as per the Sustainable Development Goal 17, which will ensure aid effectiveness and development cooperation. We must also build certain capacities in terms of logistics for the regional level decentralization. And we, as panelists said, we must also have a change of mind, a certain change of mind. So, and then when we are talking about stakeholders, it is just as my colleague panelist said, if you say stakeholders, if you have a party, vouchers will come. So you need to have a certain criteria in defining the stakeholders. So we as a ministry, we are happy for this webinar. We are also happy that this project, SOCO, has come and is trying to bring to the fore all the issues that are affecting development interventions in Ghana. And the integrative approach to development is being pursued. And the issues of local economic development and making sure that people benefit of this project are pushed to the letter. So on that note, we want to thank you very much for this assignment, and we hope that similar ones will be done to ensure that we are all on the same page and all the issues raised here are pursued to the letter. We thank you for this opportunity.
So Dr. Abdullah, just one point from my side from the World Bank. We're planning to have our second webinar on February 15, which will focus on local economic development. And we'll share more details to all the people who are participated today and also other stakeholders sometime in January about this. And secondly, we will also be sending the recording of today's discussion and information that was generated today with all the stakeholders, hopefully by Monday next week. So they will get all the information that was discussed, including videos, etc., through email. Thank you. Over to you to close.
Thank you very much. And thank you, our participants. We have over 80, we peaked at over almost 90 participants, which is great. So thank you very, very much. And we look forward to the next webinar sometime in the new year. Given that we're not going to speak to each other before then, let me take this opportunity to wish everybody happy Christmas and a very, very prosperous and happy, healthy new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.